Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Nancy Pinkerton. Hey, Nancy.
Hello, thank you for having me, Kimberly.
Yes, and you are all the way from Scotland. So
Yes.
excited to welcome you from Scotland. So, just so people can know you, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio.
Yeah.
Nancy Pinkerton is a mixed media artist originally from Canada, now residing in Edinburgh for the past 18 years. Her work seamlessly blends history, tourism, and culture, captivating audiences and earning her an associate distinction from the Royal Photographic Society in 2020 from My Scotland's Chequered Throne series. Nancy's unique approach to art, particularly through the use of levitation photography, allows her to create magical and distinctive photographs that tell compelling stories. Well, I'd like to hear all about your story, how you got into doing what you're doing. So tell us about you.
Okay, well, I was born in Canada. I grew up in Canada, and I was always creative. I love to create art and draw, and just like I would just sit on my own and grab things and make stuff. And so when I was in high school, I decided to get together a portfolio of my artwork and go to university to study art. And I applied to Mount Allison University, and I went there, and that's where I learned photography. And I fell in love with photography, not for the ability just to capture what you see, but to be able to create and use it as a tool to create something new and different. I liked using lens distortion, slow shutter speed movement, anything to create something new and different. And I'd always wanted to go traveling. I actually wanted to go traveling before I went to university, but my mum and dad said, no, you're going to go to university. You can travel afterwards. I think they regretted this afterwards.
Mhm.
Um, so as soon as I finished university, I thought, I'm going to go on a working holiday visa. And I decided to go to the UK with a friend. And I ended up coming to Edinburgh in Scotland, and I just fell in love with Edinburgh and Scotland and the culture. And I met my husband while I was here as well. So I was home for a couple of years, and then we got married, and I moved back in 2005. So I've been here ever since. And my husband's really interested in Scottish history. He's actually a tour guide in Scotland. So I've been kind of learning a lot about Scotland. I love to travel and explore, and we were talking last night actually about how much of Scotland we've seen. Like we've seen most of the mainland, not all of the islands, but a lot more than your average Scottish person will have seen, really. And I felt like I needed to work to have a job. So I worked actually in with children who are visually impaired for 17 years, but I was always doing my artwork on the side, and people would say to me, oh, refer to it as being a hobby, as my photography being my hobby. And I never sat right with me, because to me it's my profession. That's what I want to do professionally. And I was always trying to do the painting and the photography and stuff. And I felt like it was like competing, my photography work, my artwork, my life, just everything. And then in 2017, I found out about this technique called levitation photography, and I'd been teaching myself digital photography, and I thought it's really interesting. I'm going to try this out. I was going to do a shoot with a model, but wanted to practice, and I thought get some still life objects to practice. And I thought I'll grab a deck of cards, and the only one I could find was this one that had the Scottish Monarchs on it. And I thought I need to do something extraordinary with this. This is an opportunity to tell stories about Scottish history. And I I really felt passionate about that because when I first came to Scotland, I realized that I was on this tour years ago, and there was the couple that was questioning the tour guide about one of the monarchs because he was talking about James the First, and they were saying, "Oh, I think you got the dates wrong because he united the crowns in 1603," and he said, "Well, no, that's King James the First of England, and I'm talking about King James the First of Scotland." And they were still confused because they said, "Well, he's a Scottish king," and it is true, but he was King James the Sixth of Scotland. And it came out in that conversation that a lot of people, even in Scotland, didn't learn Scottish history. Whenever they learned about Scotland, it was when it was in connection with English history and the English perspective of Scottish history. And it made me kind of feel a bit sad because the Scottish history is so rich and so interesting. And it feels like it's overlooked, or it's in, it could easily get confused and lost. So I thought when I got this idea to create my series, I thought this is a great way to promote Scottish history and engage people and inspire people to learn more about that. But I also felt like this technique that I learned really pulled in all my skills because I use still lifes objects, and if I can't find what I want for the image, then I will make it. And so I'm using my other creative skills in there. And even like the process of how you create a levitation photograph, I felt was quite painterly because you're removing things using like brushes in your editing program, and it felt like quite painterly. So it felt like it just really clicked, and I was really excited about it. Unfortunately, I had a wrist injury right at the beginning of it, and I couldn't pick up my camera for 6 months. But that gave me time to plan this series. I did research into it. I decided what objects I was going to use to tell the story, and I had it all planned out. So by the time I was ready to do it, I knew what I was going to do. And I also was collecting the objects, going to charity shops, going to antique shops, ordering things online, finding whatever I needed. And then if I couldn't find it, I already had a plan of what I was going to make and or adapt.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's how I got to where I am. And then I finally over like lockdown and things, I was having real difficult time at the job that I was in. I it was I didn't have a healthy relationship with the workplace that I was in, and it was having a detrimental effect on my health. And I decided, do you know what, I need to move on from that, and this desire to do my photography had been building and building, and when I had my wrist injury, I was actually told that I would get back to my day job, but I wouldn't necessarily get back to photography. And that devastated me. And that's when I knew I needed to, that actually spurred me on really to take that leap and start my own business and start to promote my work.
Beautiful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that. And so just going back to the beginning, um, so you finish school, you
Yeah.
go to Edinburgh, and basically go back home, get your clothes, and never go back, right? Your parents are like, what did your parents say when you said, "Hey, I'm moving to Edinburgh?"
They weren't that thrilled. I mean, my mom said to me several times, she was like, "Oh, I wish I'd never said to you you could go traveling after university." Yeah, she wasn't, and every time I go home and go to leave, it's like a big, a big drama. She's always uh giving me lots of hugs and she misses me so much being so far away. Yeah, and yeah, but she supports what I do, and she does know that I love being where I am. And I've always said to her as well, you know, even if I'd stayed in Canada, my idea of where I would live in Scotland, sorry, in Canada, wasn't where I grew up. And I was like, it was either going to be Halifax or Vancouver, and Vancouver is as far away from as my hometown as Edinburgh is,
Uh-huh.
except it's cheaper to fly to Scotland than it is to Vancouver from home. So that's how I justify it to her.
Wow. Have they ever got to come over and see where you live?
Yeah, well, my mom and my sister have come over. They came over together when I was still traveling, when I was still on my working holiday visa, and then my mom has come over twice since then with friends, and my sister and her husband have come over. I think my sister, yeah, she came over with a friend once as well. My dad never managed to come over before he passed away. He didn't really he wasn't really keen on traveling and on flying. And the last time I saw him before he passed away, he said, "Oh, I might come over." But then he passed away about 3 months later, so he never managed to come. Sadly,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
not everybody likes flying. When I was a child, my grandmother didn't like flying, and so I remember a family trip with my grandmother, grandfather, my mom, and my sister and brother. And my dad couldn't go that time either, but we took a train, a 3-day train ride from Michigan to um, California because they wanted to go to
Wow.
California because all her sons that lived there. So we
Yeah.
took a 3-day train ride just because there was no way my grandmother was getting on a plane.
I know. It's funny because like in North America, the distances are so long and things, and you know, just having conversation because in Britain it's so small, and you know, having conversations about with people saying, "Oh, I've never been to the west part of Canada. I've never been to the Rockies or anything like that," and people are surprised and like, "Well, that's like a 4 or 5 day drive
Uh-huh.
from where I live," and they just can't believe it because you would never, you know, like you'd never have distances in Britain that would take you days to get to, you
Mhm.
know. So it's
Yeah,
so
a
different.
really, really different way of looking at things. So,
Yeah.
just curious, how did you get into working with um, vision impaired children? Because I don't know if you know, but I'm actually an eye doctor, so that's very
All right.
interesting to me.
Hi. Well, I mean, growing up, my dad's best friend was blind, completely blind, and he didn't live in the same town as us, but we knew him. We'd visit him every time we went to visit my grandmother. And so I was always interested in that. And then when I came to Scotland, after I was married, I was looking for a job and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at that stage. And I thought, well, I'll look at maybe doing work as classroom and as a classroom assistant while I kind of think about whether I want to maybe go and do a degree to do teaching or do something with my art or whatever, you know. And so I found this post for the Royal Blind School in Edinburgh, and I thought, and that actually really interests me, working with children who are visually impaired. So I applied for that job, and I got the job of classroom assistant. And then after I'd been there about, I think I was there about 6 years, an opportunity came up to retrain. So I applied for that, and I retrained as what's called, in this country, it's called a habilitation specialist. I think it has a different title elsewhere. I think in North America, it's mobility and orientation specialist. So
Mhm,
it's teaching children and young people how to use a long cane, how to do independent skills, travel skills, using the bus, money handling, shopping skills, the kind of lot, it's a lot of things, and route learning and how to get from A to B. There's also pre-cane skills, which is like teaching them ways that they can navigate safely through a building, like by trailing and things like that. So, and I found that really interesting because I've always been an independent person and I've always really valued that. And I did think about going into art therapy or occupational therapy before I did apply for an art therapy degree, which I was accepted for, but I didn't feel it was right. Like because with art therapy, it's a lot more psychology to it. And I was more interested in the functionality and the independence and encouraging that kind of thing. So when this came up, I thought it's a great opportunity for me to do that. And I really enjoyed that. I did that for a number of years um, well, I did that up until last September. And I love working with the children and the young people. And, because I was trained from 0 up to 25, and I worked a lot with young adults as well. And because it's so interesting that, like, I think with that, with young people who have visual impairment, a big thing is their attitude and their family's attitude, and like some families are really like very supportive, very, oh, we want them to be as independent as possible. And that kind of goes through where other parents were maybe like, oh, this poor little, you know, poor child,
Mhm.
and really wanting to be protective and things.
Mhm.
And then they don't learn the skills that they need to learn, because you need to, if you don't have vision, you need to explore um, things in a different way and learn about concepts, because we learn by seeing. If someone knocks on the door and then you see someone come in, you connect the two things. But
Mhm.
if you don't see that middle bit, you don't necessarily connect the two things. And I've seen young people, not realizing that an orange has a peel on it because they've never been given the orange in
Uh-huh.
its full capacity, because somebody's just been very kindly peeled that orange and broke
Oh,
it into
yeah.
sections. And these things you don't think about if you don't work with people who are visually impaired. You
Mhm.
don't think about it. And to me, because of my training and stuff, it's so natural to think about that. But if you don't have any experience of that, you would think, oh, you're being really helpful,
Mhm.
when actually, you are trying to. And it's with the most kindness that people do things for young people who are visually impaired, but not realizing that, you know you're it's better to try and enable them to do things for themselves so
Mhm.
they can be more independent.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And because you worked with children and young adults for quite a while, do you have any fun stories or any, I don't know, stories where it was either funny or transformational for the child?
Well, I could, when you say funny, there's a funny story. There was a young girl that I worked with, and she would just come up with the most hilarious things to me. And when she first met me, her first thing was, um, "Why are you called Mrs. Pinkerton? Is that because you like the color pink?" And then, she said to me one day, "You just don't get it. You're Canadian." Yeah.
Interesting sense of humor.
Yeah, just a different way of looking at things. And yeah, yeah. But yeah, it is so, it is such an interesting thing to work in, you know, and like in terms of the young people, you know, in inspirational stories of kind of struggling to kind of put them all together. But you know, there are, what I found is like every young person is different, and every like um they all had their strengths and their weaknesses, and there's sometimes I was like, oh, I wish you had this and you had that, you know, kind of thing, because they would complement each other and things. And there's some young people who were just very much, oh, I just want to go out and try everything. And you're like, what? But you're not quite ready to do that. And then there's others that you're like, well, you are ready to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but you're holding back because you're scared. So it's like trying to get the right balance, really, you know, of doing things. But it does always amaze me, you know, how you know how much strength people can have, and willingness to try things. And I think that's what I like about working with children, is they are a little they're more inclined to try things and try different methods and see how that works for them, you know. um Whereas sometimes as adults, I think we get a bit locked into, you know, okay, this is my comfort zone, and you know, not willing to try something new that could help, really, you know.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
So you do a specific type of photography art, where you're combining some things and some special techniques.
Yeah.
So if you were to take a piece of um art, one of your the Scotland's Checkered Throne, one of those pieces, and you were sitting next to one of your vision impaired children, how would you describe to them the photograph?
'Cause- um so yeah, so what I would describe to them is that the image is on a black background, and it has a chessboard at the bottom, and the chess pieces are set up in I can maybe if I choose a specific one, actually. So
Yeah.
um so I'll yeah. So the chess pieces are set up so that they're floating, but they look like they're going up a set of steps. And there's a knife that is pointing down to a playing card, and on the board is some coins. So I would just try and describe it very literally, you know. And also I actually, when I worked with visually impaired children, I ran a photography club for them, and I did teach them how to do the levitation technique. So that is good, you know. And if if I was able to, what I would do is set up one of my settings and show them and let them feel the objects and how they're hanging and what supports they're on, so that they can understand how I create that image.
So so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so why don't you show us some of your work? Now,
Yep.
if you are on the podcast where it's just audio, you'll have to go to the YouTube to see these, but Nancy's going to describe them very well
Yes.
so that we know
I'll
what
do
we're
my
looking
best.
at, right?
Yep. Okay, so I will share. Okay, so this is actually the first one in my Scotland's Checkered Throne collection, and it is about King Alexander II, who signed the Treaty of York with the King of England, and that helped define the Scottish-English border that pretty much still exists To this day, there's only a few areas that have changed hands, that have changed over the years, and that's the debatable lands in the west and Berg upon Tweed on the east. So how I've created this image is I printed off a map of Scotland, which is in blue, and I had it printed off on like clear plastic. So that was hanging above the chessboard, and I took out all the plastic that was around it, so it just looks like it's floating above the chessboard. And I have a feather that represents a quill that is placed against the borderline to show that this treaty was literally drawing up this line to define the border between Scotland and England. And then I have the playing card of Alexander II next to the map. And then on the chessboard, I've got the flag of Scotland, so the solitaire, which is blue and white with a white cross, and it's the St. Andrew's cross. And then on the other side, I have the England flag, which is the St. George's cross. So it's white with a red cross, but a standard cross, not a diagonal one like the solitaire. And in between them are the two king pieces, and there's a scroll of paper that goes between them tied with a ribbon. And then there's some of the bishop pieces next to them as well. So this was to symbolize this treaty that was signed that helped define this land, because before that there was some lands that were being claimed by both countries, and it was really under the reign of Alexander II that the mainland part of Scotland really started to become defined and more like what we know of it as today. So I'm going to go to the next image.
So I have a question on that.
All
So,
right.
um, when so this represents this, but when people get this piece of art, or is there a write up about it, like what you just described, so people know what
Yep.
they're looking at?
Um, yeah, so I initially I have an information sheet that goes with it that has information on the whole series. Um, but I'm planning to like send out the information as well with the art piece, like send it out and as an email so that you can get more information just about that image. And I also have these all in a book, which is the same title, Scotland's Chequered Throne. And in there, I've got a write up about each image. And then I also have some other supporting information in it. So a bit about how I create the levitation photography, a bit about how the objects that I've created in it, and just also like the planning and the finding the objects as well. And there's a map to show where some of these events happened in Scotland and a timeline, and also a bonus image. It's like kind of a one of the kings. I did another image of a different story for him, and I I ended up not choosing that for the panel in the end, but it's kind of a standalone piece as well. So that's in there as well.
Super.
Um,
Yeah. So you're
yeah,
teaching people the history, and then they get
yeah,
this beautiful, very interesting piece of art.
yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah. And I showed my book to someone recently, and they said they just were flipping through and they're like, "Oh, I know which ones these stories are just by looking at it." So if you know the history, you can kind of pick them out, which is really nice. But a lot of people don't know the history, so that's why I think it's really good to have that little story to go with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
So this one here is the story of Robert Bruce. So I thought I'd share this one because a lot of people know about Robert Bruce. He's one of probably the most well-known monarchs in Scottish history. But not everybody all knows how he became King of Scots. So this is the story about how he became King of Scots. There were the wars of independence going on because Alexander III, who was the son of Alexander II, died without an heir, and his granddaughter died as well before she could become queen. And then another king was appointed, but he was really used as a kind of a puppet for Edward I. So then he was forced to abdicate, and there was no King of Scots for about 10 years. And basically Edward I of England was a kind of overlord of Scotland, and a lot of people in Scotland weren't happy with this, and they felt that there needed to be a Scottish king. And Robert Bruce was one of those people, and so was a man called John Comyn. But they were bitter rivals. They didn't agree on anything really, apart from there needing to be a King of Scots. So they agreed to meet in a church in Greyfriars Kirk down in Dumfries. And the even before the meeting started, there was lots of tensions because Robert Bruce felt like John was kind of stabbing him in the back, going behind his back about things. And we don't really know exactly what happened in the church, but we know that things got heated and only one of them came out alive, and that was Robert Bruce. And then he quickly declared himself King of Scots, but it took a long time for him to be recognized by the Scottish nobles and then by other countries as the King of Scots. And there was lots of battles that took place. So this is a story of that meeting in Greyfriars Kirk that I have decided to depict. So how I've depicted is I have it's like a window catcher of a stained glass window that I bought in Barcelona when I was at the cathedral there, and that was hanging by fishing line, which I've taken out all the remnants of. And then in front of it is a stone cross, and the Robert Bruce card is kind of just in front of the and slightly to the side of the window, and there's a sword that is kind of going straight down just under the card piece, and laying on the chessboard is the knight piece. And then I have these silver pillars that are on the chessboard, and then the king piece is kind of lingering as well. And I have in all of the images, apart from one, I have put in a king piece or queen piece to represent the monarch and the card. And there's one that I haven't done that for, and it's a very specific reason. Yeah, so that's how I decided to depict this story of Robert Bruce.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there any other ones you want to show us?
Yeah. I've got two more. Well, one more of this series, and then one of the series that I'm working on at the moment. So this one here is of James II, and I put this in because I think this is the probably most visually impressive one. And the story behind this is that James II was obsessed with with modern artillery, particularly cannons, and he was determined to regain castles that had been captured by the English during the Wars of Independence. So he set out to siege Roxburgh Castle, and there was a new cannon in the fleet, never been tested, never been used, and he insisted on using it, and it quite literally backfired on him and killed him. I think it blew his leg off and he died. Yeah. So, and he was already before this, ironically, was known as like fiery face because he had a birthmark, a red birthmark on his face, and he had a very fiery temper as well. So how I depicted this is I have a cannon that is floating above the chessboard, and the card piece, which is sort of on a slight angle, almost on its side. And then in between the two is a flame and some smoke. And then on the chessboard, I've got just some chess pieces lined up, and then the king piece lying on its side. And how I created the flame was I used an incense stick. So I had to use several shots for this. I did one with the card in the cannon, and then I took the card out, but left the cannon in, and I put an incense stick up so that the top of it was near the back of the cannon, and lit it, and then I took several shots, and I had to use several different shots of the actual incense sticks. I had one with the flame, and then one with this, then several with the smoke to kind of create this effect. And then I used some kind of layer masks to put a little bit of color into the smoke, so you get a bit of a yellow orangey feel to it as well. So yes, that's how I created that one. Yeah. And
Takes a
then,
lot of planning.
oh yeah, it did take a lot of planning and a lot of yeah, a lot of time as well, because I would set them up and then go and take them, and then I'd have to go back and look at it in the computer and see how it worked, and then maybe go and tweak it, and then back and forth,
Mhm.
and especially something like this where I know I'm going to have several different layers, that takes a lot of thought. But funnily enough, this wasn't although it probably looks like the most challenging image to create, it wasn't. The one that is probably, it's one of my personal favorites. I don't have it here today, but it looks the most simple. But it has like it's the one that I was talking about before that doesn't have the king piece in it, and it has the card's not actually in the shot either. It's just a reflection of the card in the mirror. And that was so difficult to get that reflection, because I had the mirror hanging on fishing line, and every time I placed the card, everything would move, and I'd have to wait till everything settled. And then I would see the card wasn't in the right place, and then I'd have to do it again. And it took absolutely ages. And I think, and it was also the most difficult king to find a story for, because he was absent most of his reign, and that's the story I decided I had to tell in the end, because that was the only thing I could come up with. And I think because it was so challenging, I think that's part of the reason why it's one of my favorites, and it did turn out really beautiful and simple looking. um yeah. So the next one I've got is actually a different series, and I've started a series about the Scottish witch trials, and for this I'm using a little bit of levitation, but I'm using a bit more smoke effects in it, and it's kind of like a follow-on from the series, because the last monarch in the Scotland's Chequered Throne series is James VI, who united the crowns and became James the First of England. And he believed that witches were trying to kill him. So he had married Anne of Denmark, and he went over to Denmark. Well, actually, before that, she was trying to come to Denmark, and storms were preventing her from coming across. She would start her journey and have to turn back. So he went across to get her. And then when he was there, the Danish royal court said that they thought it was Danish witches trying to stop her from traveling to Scotland. And then as they were coming across to come back to Scotland, this big storm came up, and it actually sunk one of their ships that was carrying their belongings. And he believed that witches in Scotland were calling up these storms, and they were calling up spirits in the form of hares to topple the ship. And that then prompted the North Berwick witch trials, which is the biggest escalation of witch trials in Scotland. And there was, I believe, 70 to 200 people accused of witchcraft, and this was in 1590. So this image here that I created is an image of the king's, it's supposed to represent the king's ship. So I have this kind of metal ship that's surrounded by mist and smoke. And then I've created, using smoke effects, I've created these little hairs that you can see sort of dotted around the ship to illustrate his feeling that these spirits, these in the form of hairs, were trying to topple the ship. And I've now created 6 in this series, but the first 4 were kind of telling this story of how the witches were calling up the storms. And I got in a honorable mention in the fine art category of the annual photography awards this year for that collection of 4 images. So I'm still trying to kind of work my way through the research, finding out more about the witch trials. And James VI also wrote a book called Demonology. So I'm working my way through that as well, to kind of get a better understanding of the story, how I can tell the story in photography. And my aim is that I'll be able to have a book as well, like I have for my other collection. So
That sounds
yeah,
wonderful. Thank you for sharing those with us.
yeah.
It is really amazing work.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, yeah. So
So,
I'm sure there's people that would like to connect with you. So at
yeah,
this point, tell us, how do they connect with you? What products are available or what services are available?
yeah. So I've got an online shop. It's nancypinkerton.co.uk, and on there you can buy prints in of the Scotland's Chequered Throne series in 3 different sizes: 8 by 8, 10 by 10, and 12 by 12. And they come with a digital signature on them, like I said, information sheet, certificate of authenticity, and then I will also send you the story of the image as well. And then I've also got the book, which is Scotland's Chequered Throne. I do have it here to show. And that's available in paperback and hardcover as well. And that's available on my online shop. I'm also hopefully going to get that on Amazon within probably the next month as well. And then I don't have these up on my shop yet, but they will be going up on the shop probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and they are postcards. And this is just an example, but it's got the story on the side and the image. And then I've also got one that just has the whole collection on black and white background, because that's the way I usually present them, as in alternating black and white mounts. So if
Mhm.
I have the individual images, they're framed and mounted in alternating black and white, so they look like a chessboard. And then I've also got what's called the checkerboard collection as well, which is like that postcard or the print that's behind me. So that's available as an A1 print, A3, A2, A3 print, or also available as a canvas in those 3 sizes as well. And yeah, I feel like I've forgotten something there. Oh yes, my witch trials ones, the first 4 are available on my website as well in A3. Um, and there will be more going up. I'm planning as well to put the alternative image for that I mentioned earlier that I didn't use for the panel, put that up on my shop as well for sale. And yeah, so there'll be other things. And I'm also planning to start doing some greeting cards. So hopefully later this year I'll have some greeting cards released as well that can be purchased. And I'm also on social media. I'm on Facebook. I've got a group on Facebook which is called Almost Like Magic, Art and Photography, Exploring Scottish History. Really long title, but um, in that I share images, I like an image of the week and kind of a focus on that monarch, so a bit of the history. I also have like a this week in history, so wherever possible I kind of link it to the king, but it's not always possible. and and then there's like a little, can you guess the monarch of the week, with some clues and just little things like that, and some videos of me talking about the collection or the product that I'm promoting of the week. So yeah, so there's that. And then I've also got Instagram, I'm on TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. So, and then I have my website as well. Yeah, which is nancypinkerton.com. So
All right. Well, thank
yeah.
you for that. So now I have a personal question for you.
Mhm.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
I think just creating things, being able to create something, and yeah, that's it. Just, I'm dyslexic, and I think for me, like it's a way to kind of communicate and to and I get all these great ideas, and it's a way to just channel that into something, and yeah, and to create something new and different.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your really unique art. And I think, that's going to become like a national treasure in Scotland because people need to know their history. It's so important.
Yeah,
It's very
it
interesting.
really is.
And also, people just need to know their history. And
Yeah.
you just display it in such a lovely way with education.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, yeah. So, I have one last question before we finish. What
Mhm.
is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I think take care of yourself, and something I learned through caring for other people. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of other people. So, and it's not being selfish. It's about making sure your needs are met. And that has helped me so much, to just go, well, actually, I need to take care of me, and then I can help other people,
Mhm.
you know.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly.
We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks.